Tomorrow's Thanksgiving.
Turkey and dressing and pie and cake.
And fruit salad and whipped cream and cranberries. Gee, I can hardly wait. Me too.
Well, you know, children, we've had a lot of expenses this month, and, well, your father and I thought that... Well, the truth of the matter is, there just won't be any turkey this year.
No turkey for Thanksgiving?
Oh, I'm going to make a pumpkin pie. We'll have plenty to eat, but, well, we'll just have to get along without turkey.
Mom, you don't mean it. It won't be Thanksgiving at all.
Well, what's been going on around here? What's the matter with everybody anyway?
Mom says we're not going to have any Thanksgiving. No turkey, no good thing.
A fat lot we're going to have to be thankful for.
And don't think we're just making excuses because we don't have any turkey this year. We know it'll mean a lot more to us the next time we do have it.
Well, sure. Suppose we don't have a bang-up feast. We're still a lot better off than the Pilgrims.
That's it, Dick. Do you other kids see what Dick's trying to say? Turkey or no turkey, we've still got all the freedoms and privileges the Pilgrims gave us. And out of those privileges have come a lot of things. Things the Pilgrims never even dreamed of.
Why, we could make a list a mile long. Why don't we do it?
Now, hold on a minute. You've got the idea, but it isn't something you can write down like a grocery list. You've got to feel it down deep before you can really be thankful for anything. But I'll bet you one thing, if we really think over what we have to be thankful for, when we sit down to whatever Mother fixes to eat tomorrow, we'll be one family in America that will really have a Thanksgiving dinner. When we took our places around the table and we were ready. And then, well, we all knew it. There are some things you just can't say. But everybody in his own way knew what he had to be thankful for, and that this was the time to think about it. Tom was first.
I am thankful for getting plenty to eat all the time, and I'm thankful for the free public library, where I can get books about adventure. Jack London, Richard Halliburton. Gee, the way they tell a story is as good as being there yourself, and it's free with only a library card.
I guess Dick, being the oldest, was having some pretty serious thoughts.
I am thankful for being able to get an education, for living where schools, all schools, open their doors to a guy who wants to learn, where school books are studied instead of burned, where a guy is rated by how much he knows, and the community is rated by how well it teaches him. I'm glad I've got a chance to play, batting a ball around once in a while. Stuff like that. I'm glad it's fun, growing up in America.
And as for Mother, seems she's always working, cooking, ironing, tending children, daylight to dark. What does she have to be thankful for?
I am thankful that my children had the privilege of being born safely and of growing up healthy and strong. I'm thankful that I have the privilege of guiding them as they become useful men and women. And I'm thankful for all the things our American system makes possible for the Smiths and the Browns and the Johnsons. For washing machines, hot water out of a tap, and a telephone to call the doctor when one of the family is sick. A car to get Dad to work. Yes, I'm thankful for all the things free people working together can produce. I'm thankful that when my neighbor drops in to borrow a cup of flour, we've got the right to talk about anything we want to. The parent-teacher project, the new mayor, or Jane Jones' hat. And last of all, I'm truly thankful for the peace of mind that Dad's job brings, for knowing that even though there are lots of luxuries we can't afford, there still will always be enough to go around for the things we have to have. I'm glad Dad doesn't work slave hours, that there are evenings and Sundays and vacations when we can all be together.
That's Mother for you, grateful for what America means to her family. And now for me. I've got so many things to be thankful for. I'm thankful for this house. It may need a coat of paint, it has a mortgage, but it's ours, a place where we can be together in privacy. And I'm thankful for the thing that makes this house our home, the happiness here, not just today or on Christmas morning, but on a day-to-day basis all through the year. For knowing that a knock on our door means nothing to fear. A friend calling, or maybe a bill collector, or a kid selling magazines. You never know what to expect. But you can count on one thing. It's not going to be some political gangster coming to drag one of us off to jail because we believe in freedom. And I'm glad that that freedom we've got lets me choose the kind of work I like and can do best. Taking a sluggish motor and making it hum again. Makes me feel that somebody got to his work, or wherever he had to go, just because of me. And feeling like that gives me a lot of satisfaction. And I'm thankful for my newspaper. Just a few cents worth of printer's ink and paper, but more valuable than any amount of money. Because in it, the editor's got the privilege of printing what he thinks. And I've got the privilege of agreeing with him or not, however the facts strike me. And both of us, the editor and I, have the right to act on our opinions on Election Day, to vote for the principles we believe in. And finally, I'm thankful for being able to believe, in spite of everything, that somehow, someway, the unity we've got here in the Johnson family will someday spread to men and nations throughout the world. For all these things, we are truly and humbly thankful. Amen.
Well, hey there, folks, and happy Thanksgiving. I appreciate you tuning in today on perhaps your drive to your family's house to break bread, share turkey and cranberry sauce, and all of those ritualistic foods that we love this time of year. And without a doubt, it will certainly come up. What are you thankful for? That's what this day is all about, right? So I thought I'd get on the microphone, share with you some things that I'm thankful for, and I also have a special treat for you. I reached out to a few people at the last minute, and they were gracious enough to send me a short blurb of some audio of what they're thankful for as well. The people I've got are Pat MacFarlane from the Liberty Weekly podcast, Kyle from Foreign Policy Focus. Then I've got TJ Eckert to come on and tell me what he's thankful for this holiday season. TJ is with Being Libertarian, one of the contributors there, so it was a real treat to have him on. Also had Will Porter. You've heard Will on my show before. We talked about the Iran deal, and we also have an interview coming out just this next weekend on the cholera epidemic and what's going on in Yemen, that whole conflict. So we'll be on again this weekend as well as his little blurb here. And then the last person that I had do a blurb, this was really cool, and I think I'm just going to hold the suspense and you'll see who it is at the end. And I suppose I will start out here by just saying how thankful I am for this system of democracy and representative government that we have. You know what I get to do? I get to go to work every single day and not really worry about much of anything. I can be rest assured that the people who I have called on to represent me are there just doing what is right by me and my neighbors. And it's a pretty good deal if you think about it. It's almost like me and 700,000 other people implicitly consented to hire a lawyer to represent each 700,000 individuals. I think that is the most efficient way to adjudicate problems in our system without anybody actually having to act. Yes, it's pretty great knowing that I can just support a certain policy, vote for a person who supports said policy, and pat myself on the back knowing that I did the right thing. And to be honest, I simply don't know of any other system in which we could manage resources to where they go to exactly where they are most needed. So I'm thankful for this system of expropriation in which we use to distribute resources and create wealth. I would also like to take this time to formally express my gratitude to the people in Washington who make foreign policy decisions on my behalf. Of course, I don't want to see those classified documents that have all of the worst horrors in the world in them and make decisions on exactly what we should do with that information and what areas we should intervene in, because I simply do not want to be in that position, what place we should systematically invade or disrupt in order to suit some sort of geopolitical ends. No, it's much nicer that I just get to vote for someone who said some fluffy things about what they're going to do with healthcare and simply pat myself on the back. You know, come to think of it, I'm also thankful that I don't have to be the kind of person who goes to work every day thinking about how I could better organize other people's lives. However, I think on a more personal note, the thing that I am most thankful for in my direct life, and I just can't help but be super thankful that I was arrested several times and fined several times, including a law enforcement initiative fee, which is the fee that they charge you to raid your own home. I fear that without that intervention in my life, I would be face down in a gutter with a needle in my arm. Because we all know that's what happens to drug users. I think without them, I might end up in prison like my father. Yeah, that's probably what I'm most thankful for.
Hello, Subversion listeners. This is Patrick MacFarlane here of the Liberty Weekly podcast. You can find my work at libertyweekly.net. I'd like to start out here by thanking Trey for inviting me on the show for a 5-minute Thanksgiving blurb. I wanted to talk a little bit about how grateful I am that the government has a monopoly on essential services, because we all know that monopolies are bad, generally speaking. Well, in all cases, and I just find it super ironic that everyone thinks that, oh, it's okay for the government to have a monopoly on essential services. And you get into the public goods theory here, which is arbitrary. If you read Hans Hermann Hoppe's the first essay in his collection on the economics and ethics of private property, he talks about how arbitrary the public goods theory is. And I just think it's funny because we, at least in the Twin Cities, we have only XL Energy providing the energy services, and this is a state-sanctioned monopoly. We have Comcast providing, well, generally speaking, Comcast is the internet provider, and we are stuck with their service, if you could call it service. I have a little story about how, living in my small tiny apartment in St. Paul, we had a service main or something break on the road outside my apartment, and it shut down the entire back alley. And I chronicled this on my Twitter feed at Liberty Weekly. It took about 2 months, I think it was, for them to fix this main, and they had blocked off a portion of our back alleyway, and they put a cardboard box over the hole, the gaping hole that led to the street below, the dark depths of the street below. And I think that anyone driving over it could have easily gotten their tire stuck in it. And so this hole was left there with a few sawhorses. Well, the first few days there was a cardboard box, and then there were a few sawhorses that kind of blocked the area off. But it stayed that way for a few months, and I'm sure it's because XL Energy, the monopoly provider of energy services in this city, the state-granted private monopoly, took their sweet-ass time because, you know, they're not going to lose any business over this because they are they are chosen by the government to have a monopoly on this essential service. So there's no recourse for us. We can't drop our business to XL Energy because they didn't fix the back alley. Other than that, I mean, just talking about the roads, man, my roads, and talking about in the Twin Cities how congested it is. I think there was CongestionMN.org. There was a billboard sign that was talking about how terrible the roads are in the Twin Cities here, and I think for the size of the metropolitan area, it is one of the most backlogged traffic jammed areas in the entire country. So there was a section of 280, if you're going southbound, where it links up with 94. There was standing water in the road for months, and potholes, and entire lanes of traffic would have to shift to the side and drive off the road practically to get through it. So to wrap up this Thanksgiving rant, I'm super glad that the government has a monopoly on essential services, because I'm sure without that we wouldn't have roads and we wouldn't have electricity. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. If you got any time, check out the Liberty Weekly podcast at libertyweekly.net. We do libertarian legal theory and economics and have great interviews with great people, and looking to be on the Subversion webcast in the future and to have Trey on my show as well.
Hello, this is Kyle from Foreign Policy Focus, and my friend Trey Weaver asked me to come on the show and to tell y'all what I'm thankful for in the past year. So, as somebody who follows foreign policy and current events in foreign policy, I have an awful lot to choose from. It looks like Trump's out to set militarism records, and so while I could be very thankful for that, I think what I'm most thankful for is the United States media's cover-up of America's genocide in Yemen. Now, for those of you whose immediate reaction is, wait, how is it America's genocide in Yemen? America's not even fighting in Yemen. You'll see just how good the United States mainstream media is. One thing I absolutely hate, especially on Thanksgiving, is feeling bad about all the starving people in other countries. And right now in Yemen, there's an awful lot of them. Babies. I think hundreds of thousands of babies. They talked about 250,000 babies being malnourished right now in Yemen. Actually, extremely malnourished right now in Yemen. And so that's definitely not the kind of thing I want to think about on Thanksgiving. And the U.S. media has done this brilliant job of obscuring the war in Yemen and hiding the facts to make sure that no Americans on Thanksgiving will be thinking about the people they're killing in Yemen. If we look at the current situation in Yemen, where by the end of the year, as Americans enjoy the holiday season, there will be 1 million Yemenis who have contracted cholera. Of course, thousands dead, most of those being either the children or the elderly who can't handle the virus that causes people to die by making them vomit and shit themselves to death. Also, people are additionally vulnerable because nobody in Yemen really has food. Last estimates have 7 million people in Yemen right now starving to death, and while there are ships full of aid sitting off the coast of Yemen as the food slowly disintegrates and goes bad, grows mold, and people can no longer eat it, people in Yemen starve to death. We also have Saudi's brutal air war going on right now, where funeral homes, schools, hospitals, ambulances, bridges, roads, factories, water treatment plants, individual family homes killing entire families at a time are bombed on a daily occurrence right now in Yemen. And to be able to enjoy my holidays thinking about absolutely none of that is a gift that the mainstream media in the United States is providing me. Now, I'm sure it takes a lot of self-control in the mainstream media. Journalists love groundbreaking stories where they get to expose corruption and stop people from starving to death and dying. And so for any journalist to not bring up a 2015 New York Times article where U.S. Ambassador to the UN, at that time Samantha Power, explicitly says that we know that we're entering into this war in Yemen that has an indeterminate and indefinite ending. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know when it's going to end. So openly admitting that the United States is getting involved in an endless war and only doing it to placate Saudi Arabia because they were upset about the Iran nuclear deal. Now, for no, commentator like a Sean Hannity or a Rachel Maddow today to take the opportunity to lambaste the Trump administration for allowing all these people in Yemen to die for an Obama war that really isn't even something that the Trump administration supports. We were only fighting this war to get the nuclear deal passed without too much Saudi dissent. And now Trump doesn't even want the nuclear deal around. So why is he still supporting this? But nobody's, is going to bring this up. Nobody's going to talk about this. Like I said, it must take excellent self-control to not expose the American people to the horrors that their government is carrying out overseas. Now, I think some more savvy people in the mainstream media realize that, the war's going on, and some people like Scott Horton or Antiwar.com, Around the Empire podcast, the Moderate Rebel podcast, Mavis Blumenthal, Ben Norton, there are some people taking notice of the war in Yemen, so they feel like they have to put out some articles and then obscure what's really going on so Americans don't get too upset and don't feel bad that it's their government that's making this all possible. So rather than say that this is a Saudi war against the people of Yemen, which is what it really is, because, right, they're blockading all of northern Yemen. They don't care if it's a baby starving to death or if, it's a Houthi soldier not able to get the food they need. That this whole thing is in the context of the Iran-Saudi Arabia proxy war, which isn't the case at all. Iran hasn't provided any significant arms to the Houthis and has given the Houthis advice on several occasions with the Houthis who have not listened to. While Saudi Arabia likes to pretend like the blockade is only to keep Iran out, what's really going on is the blockade is only keeping food, journalists, and other medical aid out of the country. The mainstream media has done one of the most dishonest things I've ever seen to make people not feel bad and continue to use this 10,000 of number people killed in the conflict. The first thing they do is really crafty, and we should all be very thankful that we have people in the media who are so smart to be able to think of that they could portray the number, this 10,000 number is really only supposed to be the number of people killed in violence in Yemen. So these are only the bodies that, are turning up from either being shot or from being bombed, not all the people starving to death, not all the people dying from cholera. And so to be able to say 10,000 people have died in the Yemen civil war doesn't sound very intimidating, doesn't sound like a big deal. But if you say 10,000 people have been blown up or shot in the war and then countless others have either succumb of cholera or succumb from starvation, that's a really different story. And so to be able to blur that's important, but also to continue to use that 10,000 people dead number for 18 months is absolutely unbelievable. Now, any credible news organization or journalist would scratch their head after, probably 6 months to a year and say, it doesn't seem like any more people have died by the official count in Yemen. Maybe this number's a little out to date, but 18 months later, they continue to say 10,000 people have died in the war in Yemen. Now, just from the big incidents where Saudi Arabia has killed 50, 100, 150 people at a time, it's pretty clear that well over 20,000 people at least have been killed in the conflict in Yemen. And journalists within Yemen like Nasser Arbi, who has done a heroic and probably thankless and absolutely horrifying job of trying to add up all the dead people in this country, puts that number, I think, at about 60,000 people who have actually died from fighting in the conflict. And so for the U.S. media to be able to do this for us so we could all enjoy our turkey is extremely important. Also, whenever they have covered it, such as this recent coverage by 60 Minutes or the Washington Post editorial board, when they come out and they condemn the Saudi coalition, which is, kind of the U.S. proxy force fighting the war in Yemen, well, those people can be blamed. But at the same time, the United States' role is never revealed. The Saudi war in Yemen could not continue without U.S. support. The diplomatic cover the U.S. provides Saudi Arabia is extremely important. If you'll remember back to last year, Saudi Arabia was blacklisted by the UN for murdering Yemeni children, and the UN then took them off the list after Saudi Arabia made a little huff about it. Saudi Arabia threatened to retract some funding from the UN, so the UN said, we need the money more than we need you on this blacklist. Now, rather than the U.S. stepping up and maybe saying, we'll cover that money, that way you could keep Saudi Arabia on the blacklist, or at the very least to stop covering up and aiding Saudis, where the United States allowed the UN to do that. We also had the U.S. providing mid-air refueling for the Saudi bombers, so when a Saudi bomber goes and blows up, let's say, a funeral home, a hospital, or a school, that's done by a U.S. mid-air refueling plane, helping out the Saudi, probably F-16 or F-15 flight of their target and blow up innocent Yemenis. We also having the United States providing maintenance on the airplanes, logistical support, and intelligence support, including helping to pit the target. Now again, these should be huge groundbreaking stories, right? We could pretty easily imagine that, let's say, a Rachel Maddow or a Chris Hayes or really any, mainstream media on the left could see a huge opportunity to take Trump down here. I mean, my God, he's selling weapons to war criminals who are starving the whole country of children to death. But they somehow resist to, allow Americans to have their peace during the holidays. But what's really amazing here is just, I guess, that nobody seems to care. That the media is not able to get Americans to care at all about the situation in Yemen. It seems like it should be a very easy thing to do. if you think about it and look at some of the numbers I cited in the show in the past, at one time a study done in Yemen said that 95% of the children in Yemen were suffering from, some kind of PTSD. The long-term effects of malnutrition, even if these children don't end up starving to death. Think about what happens to a child developmentally if their brain is deprived of necessary nutrients and their, bones and as they're growing their muscles, all these, organs that need these nutrients to build and to develop in the right way are being deprived. If you just go online and you look at like the long-term impacts of PTSD and malnutrition as a child, abuse as a child, neglect as a child. All of these people are witnessing trauma. Yemen is going to be plagued for a whole generation to come. The effects of this are people are more likely to develop serious mental illnesses like depression or bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. They're more likely to suffer from addiction. They're more likely to commit violent crimes. They're more likely to abuse their domestic partners and their children. And none of this ugliness is ever talked about. It's completely ignored. The genocide of an entire population is ignored. Only the U.S. mainstream media could be gracious enough to not expose it to any of us. Well, it could make journalists' whole careers to expose the absolute war crimes going on in Yemen right now. Everybody for the past 2.5 years has exhibited the most excellent of self-control to ensure that nobody ever hears about the plight of the Yemeni people.
So this Thanksgiving, I just wanted to give thanks for three main things, which was health, wealth, and happiness. Health, of course, my health insurance nowadays, without the government, who knows how much I'd be paying. And I just want to say that I'm thankful that I'm only paying $100 more than my mortgage is because, man, these free marketeers, man, they actually think that doctors have an incentive to keep me going when I come into a hospital. And without the government, we know that would not be the case, So I'm thankful for that. And, wealth, I just want to say that I know a lot of people are complaining about the tax reform and everything. And if it were me, I don't mind paying an extra 5, 10, even 15% to take care of those guys that really can't work. Or sometimes I know I don't even feel like working. So I don't mind picking up the slack. And I mean, we can't really complain because I have a road that goes right to my driveway and it takes me anywhere I want. And for that, I just want to say I'm thankful because without that, who knows where we would be. And when it comes to happiness, one of the things I enjoy is being able to talk to you guys over the internet. And with this recent net neutrality, man, these freedom lovers, they want to roll back those regulations. And without which, I've actually heard from the news that my internet could cost me up to $1,000 a month. Can you believe that? I mean, these guys, I just want to be thankful that we have those rules and regulations in place because without government, it would just be straight anarchy. And, without those, speaking of anarchy, I want to thank what we're doing overseas because the military over there, last time I checked, we're over in Yemen doing a blockade, and without which I know that those kids that are dying of cholera would just be over here causing who knows what kind of havoc. So definitely need to thank the troops overseas for what they're doing because without their blockades and without us placating the Saudis, we'd be having terrorist attacks every other day. It's almost like we'd have mass shootings all the time and all this terrorism around Europe. Could you imagine how high it would be without our military interventions overseas? So I just want to say I'm thankful for all of those things this Thanksgiving and to all the regulations and rules that government provides us with that keep us all safe because we know that without them, it would just be a mess.
I'd like to express my gratitude for what the American government is doing in Yemen. With Uncle Sam's help, a group of countries led by Saudi Arabia has been able to slaughter tens of thousands of people and destroy entire cities in an indiscriminate bombing campaign. In the spirit of generosity and brotherhood, in Yemen, the American government provides the Saudis with vehicle maintenance, mid-air refueling, logistics and targeting assistance, weapon and munition sales, help in enforcing a blockade on Yemen's commercial ports, as well as a diplomatic cover at international bodies like the United Nations. That's not all. Thanks to the blockade, Yemen is experiencing the worst food crisis on planet Earth. 4/5 of the whole population are in danger of malnourishment and starvation. Millions of them are children. You thought I was done? Since October of last year, a cholera epidemic has broke out across the country. Cholera, the stomach disease that dehydrates you to death. Over 2,000 people have already died from it, with 900,000 more suspected cases. Now, I don't want to push it, But as a Christmas gift this year, we might even see that number surpass 1 million. Wouldn't that be something?
Hey everybody, this is CJ from the Dangerous History Podcast, and I have to say, it is a tall order to select just one thing that I'm really thankful for the U.S. government doing, because after all, they do so much, both at home and abroad, to make everything peachy. But I have to say, if you put a gun to my head, I'd have to say the thing I'm most thankful for are the drone wars, the drone strikes. Because if the government wasn't there doing this, who would? How on earth would the private sector handle slaughtering tons of people with flying robots armed with Hellfire missiles based on shady intelligence? How on earth would the private sector handle such an important function of civilization? It's absolutely vital to have a powerful, wealth-consuming, freedom-obstructing Leviathan for countless reasons, but especially to keep the drone war going. Because if you didn't keep the drone war going, in which you kill a few dozen people with a flying robot for every one maybe terrorist you get, how on earth would you keep the perpetual motion machine of the war on terror going? How on earth would you have insurgent math to make sure that for every one potential actual quote-unquote terrorist that's taken out, we create a bunch of new ones? After all, don't you want 10 minus 2 to keep equaling 20 forever and ever ad infinitum? And on top of that, the drone war demonstrates the massive amount of bravery of the U.S. government. After all, our enemies are only willing to incinerate themselves just to strike at us. Clearly they're cowards. Whereas to remote control a flying robot from literally the other side of planet Earth clearly constitutes the highest level of bravery one can conceive of. And who can forget the wonderful awesomeness of not just striking wedding parties and things like that, but how about the double tap? Only a benevolent institution like the U.S. Federal Leviathan could possibly have come up with such an awesome and civilizing idea as the double tap, wherein one strikes a target and then waits until help arrives to try and clean up the dead and wounded, and then you hit that as well. Gotta love the double tap. So as you sit around your Thanksgiving dinner table and enjoy your turkey and gravy and cranberries and whatever else it is you eat, stuffing, who knows what, lobsters, maybe if you want a really traditional Pilgrim-style Thanksgiving, some lobsters and venison, but whatever it is, as you enjoy it, and as you think and reflect on all the things that you're thankful for, most of them, of course, coming directly from the Leviathan under which you live, make sure that in that list, preferably somewhere near at the top, you think about the drones. The Hellfire-armed Predator and Reaper drones. Because if not for Team America, if not for Uncle Sam, who would rain down the Hellfire from flying robots and keep that insurgent math chugging along forever?
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe on your way out and find us on Facebook at facebook.com/subversionwebcast.